Let's underscore this also, though, in terms of why it didn't necessarily work out for Pence. We have a focus group that CNN actually did immediately after the debate in Iowa. So let's all take a listen to that about who they said actually won the debate.
Here's what I want to ask you about who you thought did the best during this debate. Basically, who do you think won the debate? I'm going to do it in alphabetical order to be fair. Anyone think Doug Burgum did the best? That's 0. Anyone think Chris Christie did the best? He certainly got most of the airtime. A lot of the airtime, not most of the airtime. How about Ron DeSantis? How many of you think Ron DeSantis did the best? That's 2 people. How about Nikki Haley? 1, 2, 3, 4 people. Asa Hutchinson? Mike Pence? 0. Vivek Ramaswamy? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Tim Scott? Okay, so this panel here thinks Ramaswamy won the debate.
So I personally really like that focus group because it matches up with my winners and losers. Because number 1 top winner was Vivek, and number 2, I actually thought Nikki Haley of the also rans did herself some favors, in particular in her exchange with Vivek on Ukraine, where she actually got the crowd behind her. I thought it was the one moment where Vivek was really kind of on his heels and where she got the better of him in that exchange. But Kyle, what are your overall thoughts?
So, like I said, I think Ramaswamy came out of the gates hard and he was doing well early on. I think he fell off massively. He had a number of lines where he got very clearly booed. His thing on climate change, calling it a hoax. I think on the issue of Ukraine, regardless of what you think of the substance, I think Nikki Haley got the better of him on that. I even think Mike Pence got the better of him on that. There were moments where he just sort of faded into the background. He was shining bright and then he sort of faded into the background. So I don't agree with you on that at all. My biggest winners, I agree with you on Nikki Haley. I think she did way better than anybody expected.
Yeah, she beat the bar.
But I also think, and you'll definitely have an issue with this one, I actually think DeSantis had a way better debate than I was expecting. And I watched it twice. And when I went back and I listened, there was a number of lines where he got really loud applause. So nobody laid a glove on him and he was able to get his talking points out. He got really loud applause. And I think that he comes out of this looking the best, to be honest.
What do you think?
I actually agree completely with that point because, again, I think all he needed to do, he knows that this debate is not going to make a huge dent in the polls. That's actually probably one of the most important things, predicates that you could come into that debate as a candidate thinking, unless you're Vivek, unless you're the freshman in that analogy that I'm not torturing. But I think DeSantis just needed to be there. He needed to not have any moments where he gets dunked on, and he didn't need to have moments where he dunks on other people. He just needed to be solid because this debate is not going to change a 40-point lead. That's going to have to be done on the ground in Iowa.
Well, it's sad that you're both wrong.
I thought Jonah Hill won the debate.
Something we can all agree on.
Yes.
No, so here's my analysis with DeSantis. I agree that I thought he did fine. I didn't think he had any big mess ups. I thought he had some answers that were kind of weaselly politician, but whatever. They all have those moments, right? I thought he was totally solid, and I expected him. I put him as one of my predictions as a winner going in because the bar has been set so low for him with all of the let's find every awkward moment we possibly can of Ron DeSantis and convince people that he is the weirdest human being on planet Earth. And he's a little weird, but he's not the weirdest human being on planet Earth. So I do think that he exceeded the bar. I thought he was perfectly solid. But if you're Ron DeSantis, and you were the guy that was tied with Trump in the polls for a while, that coming out of the midterms, you were the winner, you were putting points on the board, check the scoreboard, whatever. For you to lose the spotlight to Vivek Ramaswamy, for you to get outshone by Nikki Haley, that's a big loss. And I think that his polling will probably go down just because this is with this divided field. If you have other people who are sucking up oxygen and getting attention, it's got to come from somewhere. It's probably not coming mostly from Trump. And so that's why I think overall, in some ways, he was the biggest loser because he's so diminished from where he used to be.
Go ahead,
Kyle. You can't hold his past against him. The question is whether or not he won that particular debate.
Well, the way I'm looking at this is what are the polls going to do?
Right.
I think they're going to go up for him, for sure.
I don't think
so. See, I'm very curious to that, Bill, because the thing is that DeSantis has slid, as Krystal is saying, now from 35-40 all the way down to the RCP average somewhere between 16-17. Ramaswamy are already around 12. I was talking about this earlier in the show. Iowa, he's got 40% no name ID. People don't even know who the guy is. So if DeSantis slips from that and then Ramaswamy starts to get up, not only is Ramaswamy then potentially taking over Ron DeSantis, but then there's an entire media cycle about this guy came from nowhere and is now overtaking number 2 with an earned media that spirals there. People like to pick a winner. I mean, look, all of this, again, as you said, Emily, Trump is above all of this.
Yeah, they're all Trump voters. Ramaswamy has no actual support. These are all Trump voters, I think.
But I mean, listen, there are some people, at least in Iowa, currently, from what we can see, let's call it 1/3. Maybe let's call it anywhere between 1/3 and approximately up to like 40%. There's people who are not, they like Trump. They have a lot of affection for Trump. They're willing to vote for somebody else, especially in this ridiculous caucus system. The whole, how does it work? It's like 1, 2, and then, you know, if this person goes away, then you can go and you can caucus with somebody else. They kind of like the whole, what is it? They vote with their heart in Iowa. So I think that in that scenario, I could see a big night for Vivek.
Vivek told them Trump is the best president of this century.
Yeah.
So why are you running?
Listen,
why are you running?
That
makes no sense.
I really wish, Emily, the moderators asked that damn question. If you believe that,
would be a good question.
why are any of you running against Trump? I would actually have loved to see that question.
Here's the thing. Everybody on stage was either a total Trump sycophant or a Trump hater, except one person, Ron DeSantis.
Interesting.
It's true. So there were a bunch of he hit lockdowns and the deep state, and Fauci got a huge applause. He hit Soros-funded DAs, huge applause. He did his line, which I actually, when I went back and watched it a second time, I thought he handled this brilliantly. When they were trying to get him to answer, like, did Mike Pence do the right thing? He basically said, look, I've got no beef with you, Pence. You did the right thing. But then he went, why are we even talking about this, though? We're helping the Democrats. We should be focusing on the issues. He got a big applause on that. He said, kill people at the border, leave them stone cold dead. Got a big applause on that. By the way, I hate all of these things, but I'm just saying it landed. Special forces invading Mexico to attack the drug car. Huge applause on that. He's the only one who didn't get hit and wasn't a Trump sycophant and wasn't a Trump hater like Asa and Christie were. So I definitely think he comes out of this looking the best.
Here's the thing, because the other piece is, like, what did you think this debate was about? And to me, this debate is not about beating Trump.
Right.
This debate was about being the top alternative to Trump. And given the Republican base's affection for Donald Trump, the best way to position yourself as the top alternative to Trump is by being as Trump sycophantic as you possibly can.
That's so beta.
I think it's
So
true.
beta.
That, I mean,
Yeah, it's a number 2 race style.
He's the best. I love him. Vote for me. He's the best.
It is 100%. It's totally beta. But at the same time that you say, it's beta, Vivek was the person who had the most, like, assertive, like, vibes on the stage.
Yes.
And so much of this is about the vibes. He was the fighter. He drew the fire. He was able to parry the attacks. He was the center of attention, sort of coming out of nowhere. And so the fact that, he was the center of the show, and DeSantis, who was really supposed to be the guy, was on the sidelines, I think in terms of that jockeying to be the potential number 2, there's just no doubt in my mind Vivek won that away from DeSantis.
I haven't been, for like the last couple of months, been thinking every question that Vivek handles in regard to Donald Trump is exactly how Ron DeSantis should have been handling it from a strategic perspective, because it's that huge Trump contingent that is going to vote for him right now. And if you are trying to take that, maybe there's some persuadable people in there that you can get into your basket. If you're trying to do that, you have to show that you're on the same page as them when it comes to Donald Trump. Otherwise, you are going to be put in the basket of an establishment hack who doesn't understand what Trump did to the Republican Party. If you're somebody who votes for Donald Trump, you're somebody who's saying, I'm tired of establishment politicians. Ron DeSantis acting like an establishment politician and having these canned answers when it comes to Trump, I genuinely don't think has been helpful.
Let me back up what she's saying, and I want to hear your response, which is that at the end of the day, all these people are running as number 2, and their hope and prayer is that something happens to Trump. As you said, he goes to jail, and then the MAGA people actually have to choose somebody alternatively. Very low chance, but it's possible. I've told this anecdote before. Lyndon Johnson, they asked him, they're like, why are you being the vice president? You're one of the most powerful people in Washington. And he named the number of presidents that have been killed. I think it was like 1 in 5. He's like, 1 in 5. I like those odds, darling. That's what he said to a reporter. So it's like, that's effectively the game.
And that's
that
when
all these
politicians
guys
were younger.
are playing. Yeah, that's true. When people were younger. So in this scenario, Vivek, by defending Trump the most, can consolidate in this hypothetical, like, black swan scenario.
Which is
he
the
could
only
actually get those,
path, by
which
the
is
way.
the only path for
It's the
any of
only
these
path.
people.
Yeah.
So in that, what do you think
agree.
of that?
I don't agree.
Go ahead.
First of all, these people, they're siloed off. They're in their own bubble. There was, when they asked a question about, like, if Trump gets convicted, would you still vote for him? And, like, everybody's hand went up except Asa and Christie. When I look at that, I'm like, general election, over.
But we're not talking about general
I
election. We're
understand
talking
that,
about
but
a
I'm
primary
saying,
system. Yeah.
but okay, what's the ultimate goal? They're running for president. The ultimate goal is to get to the White House. Okay, so congrats. You might, if Trump ends up in prison, you might have weaseled your way by sucking him off into getting into the position where you run against Biden.
Win.
But you're going to lose. You're going to lose. So I just
Maybe.
look at this. I think to me, it's like, oh, Vivek's being called anti-establishment. There's nothing anti-establishment about this guy. First of all,
I know.
Yeah, and when you're snuggling up to the guy with 91 criminal charges against him, and you think, what, that makes you an outsider? And he was, of course, he was trying to be anti-war on the one hand, but then on the other hand, he kept bringing up China in a hawkish manner. He's called for war with Mexico over the drug cartels. Okay, but substance aside, I think that beta strategy makes you a beta. Like, I don't think anybody who's supporting Vivek is actually going to support Vivek. I agree with you, his numbers are going to go up after this. But I think it's fake support. I think they're ultimately all going to vote for Trump because Vivek is telling them Trump's the guy.
Republican voters will see it as beta that Ron DeSantis is taking D.C. talking points on Trump. That's the Republican voter perspective.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but they're wrong.
Let me just play devil's advocate in terms of like a possibility to another, like a Trump actually getting outright defeated, which I don't think is going to happen. I think that he would have to be sort of removed by going to jail or something crazy like that. But, you know, in Iowa and in New Hampshire, I'm looking right now at the Real Clear Politics average, and he's quote unquote only at 43% in Iowa and 44% in New Hampshire. That means a majority of Republicans are actually not with him in those states.
Yes.
And are at the very least evaluating their alternatives. Right now, in both of those states, as it stands, Ron DeSantis is the top alternative. I would submit it is very possible that after this debate, Vivek moves into that position of being the top Trump alternative. With all of the media attention, Americans love also like a fresh new face, someone we didn't hear about before, who's new on the scene. Like Americans love that story regardless of the political party that they're in. And so I think the fact that he outshone DeSantis and was the center of so much attacks from some figures on that stage that Republican base, by the way, really hates, I think that's very beneficial for him, and I think it's really deleterious for DeSantis.
The math in Iowa is actually interesting. It does not match up to the general election math, but it does have DeSantis down by 26 points. And the fact that we're even calling that interesting is funny because we are still pretty far away from people actually going to caucus in Iowa. But if Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy start to become competitive in Iowa, what's important to think about is that is the reverse, basically, of what's happening nationally, in that most people in Iowa say they want to vote for somebody other than Trump. He's still under 50%. I think, in Iowa.
Yeah.
And that is fascinating because that means you get into a scenario where you maybe have people dropping out, like what happened with Democrats in 2020. And if somebody does manage to win Iowa, Ted Cruz won Iowa in 2016. This is why I think Ron DeSantis' campaign strategy, which is very directly to put all of their eggs in the Iowa basket, I think is stupid to begin with because you can win Iowa and still not do much. But you could consolidate a portion of the Republican vote and then see if you can flip that national math to look more like Iowa. It's a long shot.
Yeah.
But Vivek, and if Ron DeSantis and Vivek come close like that, you're going to see some really interesting stuff happen.
Let me ask a different question that I'm curious about. Do you think that Trump is going to start attacking Vivek if he does go up in the polls and does take some of the spotlight?
Yes. That's interesting.
I don't think so.
Not yet.
I think
I think Trump will only start attacking Vivek when Vivek says something negative about him. That's how Trump operates. He's super transactional.
I completely
You could say
agree.
80 things negative about him, but if the very last thing you said about him was positive, then it'd be like, great guy, wonderful guy, really smart guy.
Maybe, but you might be right. I'm ambivalent about this question myself. I don't know the answer. But
He's not a threat.
The counter argument would be that the other thing you can do to Trump outside of, like, you know, being disloyal is stealing a spotlight.
He's not a threat, though. See, that's where we fundamentally disagree. I think he's so not a threat and he's so beta that Trump is loving this. He's getting free advertisements from the guy who was at the debate.
Yes and no. So look, Trump is a media whore. A front page of the New York Times this morning, Ramaswamy, you know, dominates debate. Front page of the Washington Post.
That's a good point.
Ramaswamy. I mean, the Trump, New York Post, Ramaswamy. Our headlines, Ramaswamy.
Certainly
I mean,
Fox
But
News.
Trump was giving him credit, though.
That's a good
Trump was
point.
giving him
Trump
credit,
was good,
too. Yeah.
but look, this is why I hated DeSantis in the first place. DeSantis didn't say one word about him. It was when DeSantis was winning Florida by 20 points. It's when DeSantis was actually getting better headlines than Trump was that it started to drive him crazy. The one reason why I think it's a little bit different is Trump feels stronger today than he did about DeSantis several months ago when DeSantis was much nearer to him in the polls. And I think that Vivek does a much better job of actually playing ball. He's one of those where DeSantis clearly is irked by the Trump attacks. DeSantis also has hit back in like veiled ways. Ramaswamy will never do that. And I think it's actually a correct move whenever it comes to running again for this hypothetical number 2 to number 1 scenario. So if there is a situation where Trump attacks him, it will be because of this earned media, but I don't see that happening just yet because Vivek is still a flash in the pan in terms of this amount of media attention. Think about the amount that DeSantis has had. for almost, 2 years?
Yeah.
All throughout the COVID pandemic, up until the GOP primary. Vivek hasn't had anywhere close to that. It would have to reach that level for him to begin to regard him as a serious threat.
Look, I just look at Vivek as the Republican version of Pete Buttigieg. And I also look at him, and even though I agree with you, his numbers will go up after this. You know, there was a moment when Ben Carson was leading in the Republican primary. There was a moment when Herman Cain was leading. There was a moment when Carly Fiorina had a good debate and led for 2.5 seconds. So I look at it kind of like that. And also, I think, just final point, I know I'm beating up on the guy, but like, he is so politician-y. And the whole thing about Republicans, which I actually gave them a lot of credit for, is that they are much more likely than Democrats to go, I don't want any of your politician nonsense. And I get that stench from Vivek, and I don't see it. I don't see it.
Emily, one thing I wanted to get from you specifically is Vivek and Ron DeSantis, both when they launched their campaigns, all in on anti-wokeness. That was the center of their pitch. That was the center of DeSantis's like legislative agenda in Florida. Florida is where woke goes to die. Vivek wrote the book. Like, this was their thing. No one said a word about wokeness last night.
We don't think it was said once. Do you remember one?
I think Nikki Haley said it once.
Did
I think
she?
she said like there's some woke stuff happening in schools.
Oh,
I think it was like in passing.
But it was certainly wasn't a question.
one
It
time,
wasn't a
still
focus.
crazy.
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis got pitched a question down the center about like, tell us about education. Word did not come out of his mouth.
He did say CRT, though. He did mention CRT.
Yeah, it doesn't
Sure.
qualify, though.
That's adjacent. It's adjacent to wokeness.
It's
Sure,
adjacent.
but it's like-
just think of, okay, just for comparison, remember when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed?
Right.
And they were like, the wokeness, that's what did it. I mean, that's
true.
the discourse we were in, was like, literally, you know what's wrong with the military? The wokeness, every single problem, it came back to wokeness. And then for that to be completely disappeared from the debate last night, they got the memo. This was not the thing that
What did you
Republicans
make
cared
of
about.
So I think it is literally a memo. That would be my
Wow.
theory, is that they actually did focus groups and they've been poll testing this. And especially when you have really high inflation, when you have horrific wildfires in Maui, it is not going to look good to get on that stage and just start banging the wokeness drum over and over again, which to people, and I'm actually really curious about this. I'd love to see numbers, especially the numbers that they clearly have behind the scenes about wokeness, if it has just started to feel like a cartoonish, empty type of rhetoric, as opposed to something that felt real in 2020 and 2021 when people were actually like reeling from what was happening in COVID schools, what was happening in big cities. It's just maybe feels stale to people now, and it maybe feels fake to people now. And so you have to find a different way to talk about it. And so I think that is a huge takeaway. You guys are completely right about that. I don't think anybody made a mistake by not laying in
I agree.
to wokeness. With that language, he can talk about critical race theory, but woke has just started to feel cartoonish.
What I'll back
probably.
Kyle up on is I thought DeSantis was the best version of himself last night. As in, he was constantly talking about, he's like, I'm the governor. I'm the governor of one of these populous states. I actually did this. You know, Florida, we have record low crime rate. Everything was about governance and experience and going to his political record. I really appreciated that version of him because I've always thought that was his strongest thing. He's like, listen, people moved to Florida because of my leadership. End of story. I want to turn America, you know, I want to give that same dream to everybody else. Now, I think there's a lot going on. I don't necessarily if I want America to be Florida, but that's like, let's put that aside. The point being that that's a very strong message that I think both is a GOP and a general electorate message that DeSantis was able to convey.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was solid. I think he was the only one who didn't get a glove laid on him. He was in and out quick. He got a bunch of big applause lines. And actually, I was surprised after the debate when they released, you know, who talked the most. I think he came in third, which I was like, I didn't even realize he talked that much.
He
so
was-
he got a
he was
decent amount
fourth,
out there. Oh, was it
actually.
fourth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pence, Vivek, and then
It was Pence, Vivek, Christie, and then Ron
DeSantis, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to your point, like, yeah, what happened? I thought wokeness was the #1 problem in the country.
Yeah, but they
What happened?
I mean,
You didn't bring up the #1 problem in the
I think
country?
basically what happened is Ron DeSantis leaned all the way into that, and his
Right.
polls went.
No, that's exactly right.
Maybe
but
this
it is
isn't
kind of
working out.
They have
Well-
such good message discipline. These guys flip on a dime, man.
This is going to sound
also
really weird, but Jennifer Aniston came out this week
saw that. I saw
and
that.
criticized
Of course I
cancel
saw that.
culture.
Yeah.
It's like 2023, and
Yeah.
everyone shrugs.
Yeah.
Now, if she had done that in 2020, like one of the world's biggest movie stars, one of the
Right.
world's biggest TV stars coming out and being like, listen, I think cancel culture, like, what is it? Maybe it goes a little too far. That would have been headlines for days. She would have had to put
Right.
out an apology, et cetera, et cetera.
True.
And now
Can I
everybody
say what was
shrugs.
so annoying
That's
about
so
that
true. true.
quote, she said, quote, "I'm so sick of cancel culture," and then she goes, "I'll probably get canceled for saying it."
Yeah,
And I was like, shut up,
Who's
Jennifer. You're not
canceling
gonna get
Jennifer
canceled
Aniston?
for that, okay?
No one even noticed that
yeah.
she said it.
Okay.
You made
All
a
of
joke
this-
in 1997.
All of this
I'm
was
against
promo
this.
for the morning show season 3. I was there for season 1. Season 2 is like, I think it's gonna get a little iffy. Season 3, I'm not sure anybody asked.
I see a lot of you guys in the morning.
In the morning show. The only thing that you're correctly getting is that people get bitchy and annoyed when they have to wake up early morning for this job. That's a whole other
me too.
conversation.
So let me give
Yeah.
you guys some numbers. This is from JL Partners and the Daily Mail. They did, quick poll last night after the debate of who won and who lost. And partly I want to get from you guys. We've talked about Vivek a lot. We talked about Ron DeSantis a lot. I want to get from you all of the sort of also-rans, if you thought anyone stood out. So who, in your view, performed best in the debate of Republican voters? 28% said Vivek. That was number 1. But very closely behind him, number 2, Ron DeSantis,
Yep.
27. Number 3, Mike Pence. Number 4, Tim Scott. Number 5, Nikki Haley. Next is Chris Christie, then Doug, Asa, and then at 9% don't know. What do you guys think of those numbers? And I'm curious, like I said, about some of the also rans, because I personally thought Nikki Haley did herself some favors. She exceeded my expectations. Since the beginning of the campaign, since she launched, she's kind of disappeared. I thought she reasserted herself and, had a good exchange with Vivek and also was very strong on her views on abortion. Kyle, what did you think in terms of also rants? Anyone stand out to you?
So here's my breakdown of it. Burgum and Asa barely exist. They should have been asleep. They would have been more productive. Asa's eye popped halfway through the
that was
debate, and it
weird.
was
That
bloodshot
definitely
red.
weird.
It's unfortunate.
Burgum was high as balls on Percocet, which that's what's up. Live your best life. But he had it because
He
he
did
had.
have a pocket constitution.
He had a pocket constitution.
a little bit
He
of
also
hope for
had
that.
a torn Achilles too, so there was a lot going on there. But
Yeah.
those guys, they barely exist. Pence was way more aggressive than I expected,
Same.
and way more high energy. But he also his super religiosity came out. I think Pence is also incredibly politician-y. He had moments where it was like, oh, that's such a politician line.
He's got the sanctimonious.
Yeah,
vibe.
totally
He's
sanctimonious.
really
You know what?
owning the sanctimonious lane.
It's like the Marshall Sorkin thing that you were
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about.
100%.
He
With,
practiced.
Yeah.
It's like he practiced some of those lines in the mirror.
No, you
Like
know,
I said in front of God. Like
You know what's worse? I think that's actually who it is.
Without a
I've
doubt.
had meetings
Oh,
with the guy.
really?
I genuinely, that's kind of.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is why it's worse.
So weirdly
Yeah.
more authentic, but
he's
it's
very
gross.
similar on
Yeah.
and off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also thought there were moments where he was having a legit identity crisis on stage when he's trying to explain
Trump.
January 6th.
Yes.
It's like, who are you trying to convince? I did the right thing. I did the right thing. Like it was very needy. It seemed like he wanted the audience's approval for his like whole January 6th shtick. I think Nikki Haley, I agree with you. I think she's one of the winners of the debate. I think her numbers are going to go up. She
Yeah,
did way better than
Yes,
First of all, I
I agree.
expected nothing of Nikki Haley at all. I find her incredibly boring. She's a donor creation. But then when she got up there and she started throwing some haymakers, I was like, okay, Nikki. So I think she did a decent job. Tim Scott did better than I thought, but he has no juice, so it doesn't really matter. Christie did a mediocre performance, but everybody was against him. Everybody on stage, everybody in the crowd. He had tough odds, and that's pretty much
Did
everybody.
you miss Perry Johnson being on this stage? Was that a real loss?
I miss Larry Elder. I'll say that.
I
Larry
actually,
would
I
have
love
been
Larry.
fun, actually.
I did a
Oh,
segment.
yeah.
I think Larry got screwed.
I don't know about it. I haven't looked into the
I looked
details,
into it,
actually.
and it looks like because he used a Rasmussen poll, and they told him after the fact you're not allowed to use a Rasmussen
Oh,
poll. And it's like you guys use Rasmussen polls all the time.
That's a good point, actually. Emily, final thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, so first of all, I thought it was hilarious that Asa was bragging about being the former head of the DEA while looking blazed. Anyway,
call.
I think a big takeaway from those numbers is this is a huge loss for Tim Scott, who has
Yes,
been
I
banking
totally
on
agree.
doing very well in the debates. There's actually a lot of money behind him, which is not surprising because he's on the banking committee. But there's a decent amount of money. He's really been working on an infrastructure in Iowa and those early states, and to I think flop. He didn't just do well. He actually was a little less than that. He was a little less than solid or baseline, because there were times when he was just like pushing so hard to speak, and there were times when it was like he paused after being asked a question. It was just
There were a
didn't
few
go well.
uncomfortable moments for him, I thought.
Yeah.
Nothing like horrendous.
Right.
But he needed
Right.
to have the Nikki Haley night at the very least. And he did.
Exactly.
Especially when
yes.
everyone's running for such a small lane. It's like, you got to dominate that, man.
He needed
Yeah.
that. He needed to have Nikki Haley or Pence, where he was injecting himself confidently into the conversation and taking some of those big exchanges in a way that was actually appealing to those kind of Pence type. That lane, the never Trump lane, he really needed to hammer it, and he just didn't, despite the fact that he does have a lot of money behind him, and there are resources invested in him. So to not even do baseline well at a debate is a pretty big
Well,
loss.
and that's
100%
actually a
agree.
great point, because the donors are shopping around right
Yep.
now. right? They were going to be behind DeSantis. They're kind of like, this didn't really work out. We didn't love your answers on Ukraine and on abortion and other things. They've been shopping. They've been thinking about Glenn Youngkin, if they go to sleep at night or whatever. I think out of last night's debate, the donors are going to be taking a big look at Nikki Haley. And they've
100%.
always had an affinity for
love
her.
Yeah.
She has the right ideological positioning for them.
She's
she tried
talented.
to moderate on abortion. She, has the neocon view on Ukraine. Like, she's in the right places ideologically. And I think they'll look last night at her performance and say, oh, there's something here. And she might be the next, donor flavor of the moment, which is, that's the thing. That gives you money, that keeps you in the fight, that gives you positive Fox News headlines and Wall Street Journal headlines and whatever. So it's definitely a thing that matters. Does it get you to the presidency? No.
Yeah. Big winner was Paul Singer there in that debate. All right.
I agree. I agree with
wish
you
him
on
the
that.
best.
I don't feel like it matters though.
Yeah.
It's 2016 all over again.
You're probably right. Okay, guys, we have to go. Thank you so much. Incredible conversation here. We hope everybody enjoyed it. We've got the debate special going on. Take advantage of that if you're able to. BreakingPoints.com. Otherwise, we will see you all next week.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.